Hello and welcome to the third event in the Bristol 24/7 Presents series. Thank you everyone who's joining us today. My name's Ellie, I'm the News and Business Editor for Bristol 24/7, and the focus of today's event is going to be on how Bristol's business community can help lead an economic recovery that is fairer, more inclusive, more sustainable, and also one that enables businesses to thrive. So just to give you an idea of what's coming up over the next hour and a half or so, we're going to be showing a couple of short films with contributions from some of our Better Business members and also leaders in Bristol's non-profit sector who are going to go some of their views on the topics we're covering today. We'll then be going straight into a live panel discussion, and there's an opportunity to ask questions and everything as we go along there. We're then going to be finishing off with a short presentation from Jake and Dan from Tusco, who are going to talk about their journey towards becoming a B Corp. First, Matt is going to tell you a little bit more about the Better Business membership model.
Thanks, Ellie, and a warm welcome to everyone who's joined us on the live feed today. Like Ellie mentioned, we've got loads of content coming up for you today. I'm particularly looking forward to the panel discussion that's going to be coming up shortly, just to hear some of the interesting views and points from our panellists. My name's Matt. I manage the Better Business initiative here at Bristol 24/7. For those of you that don't know, Better Business was launched by Bristol 24/7 in 2018 to help businesses thrive whilst making a positive impact on Bristol and the people who live here. And we've done this through a number of social impact projects aligned to support for young people, giving a voice to marginalised communities, and support for environmental projects. Our current project, which we've just launched with Western College, the Better Business Traineeship Programme, aims to give an opportunity for young people within Bristol to get experience within organisations and businesses, and this is absolutely crucial at the moment when youth unemployment is rising and unfortunately is set to continue to do so. For more information on this project, or if you're interested in getting involved and joining as a member, please head over to www.bristol247.com/betterbusiness, or just give us an email at partnerships@bristol247.com. The initiative has grown to now include 6 partners and over 60 members, and we'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for your continued support. In particular, we'd like to thank Steel Financial, a founding member of Better Business, for sponsoring today's event, and here is a short message from Ben, their Managing Director.
As a Better Business founding member, Steel Financial are really proud to be sponsoring today's event. We decided to become a Bristol 24/7 Better Business member because it just seemed like a really good way to help build local small businesses in Bristol. So there didn't seem to be anything else around that was championing small business owners, independents. Even though it is quite a big area for Bristol, there didn't seem to be anything else that was sort of helping push that forward even more. I think the way Bristol could bring back a stronger, greener and fairer economy would be to start putting more time and effort into small businesses and independents. You've got places like Gloucester Road, Park Street, Whiteladies Road, they're thriving hubs of small businesses. But Bristol needs to do more work in terms of transport and access to encourage people to actually use these small businesses. So to support small businesses, what we're doing here at Steel Financial is giving that shoulder to lean on for the small business owners. So right at the beginning of March, in the first lockdown, we created a mail shot list straight away. And what that did was just keep communication going between all of these business owners that we look after and ourselves. So we made sure they knew we were available throughout. And what we also did was provide lots of sort of weekly updates on government assistance, grants that were available. And then we slowly introduced extra help, like how to keep your cash flow going, how to plan ahead. It was going down so well, we opened it up to all small business owners, regardless if you're a client or not. Because we realised, especially in the Bristol area, there was a lot of small business owners that were panicking and not really knowing where to turn. So we started to give that shoulder to all of those as well. in light of all of that additional help that we've been giving to our clients and other small business owners, what we've seen is a really great reaction where small business owners are now coming to us to join the firm as a client. I think seeing how proactive we were and how sort of there for our clients we are constantly, even through such hard times this year, I think that's encouraged them to come on board. So as champions of small businesses in Bristol, I'd really encourage everybody to join the Better Business Initiative. It just means that there's more of us pushing forwards the independent sector to help it thrive even more.
Thanks again for those words, Ben. And I have to agree, I think small businesses and independents can have a huge part to play in how we recover from these challenging times. Definitely. Before we move over to the panel discussion, which will be coming up shortly, we've got two short films to show you. The first film has a number of our members discussing the impact of COVID-19, how their organisation and business has been impacted, and also how we can come back following this pandemic fairer, greener, stronger. The second of our videos has a number of non-profit organisations discussing the challenges that we face and how we can build back better. And then straight after those videos, we'll be heading into the panel discussion with Ellie, which we're all very much looking forward to.
And I'll find
fairer,
greener,
stronger,
and stronger.
All our teaching used to be mostly face-to-face. So almost overnight, we had to convert all our teaching to an online version as our students departed for home and our staff were in their homes and not on campus. So a very dramatic change.
So the biggest impact for our organisation is with wellbeing to the staff, whether that's for looking after little ones or if it's looking after themselves. It's been a struggle for everybody involved.
And we've been remote working, we've been encouraged to buddy up and really just keep looking out for each other, and when we do have meetings with people, just always check in and see how we're doing.
It has impacted the hospitality industry as a whole and also our organisation significantly.
It really affected all parts of our business.
It's had a big impact on our customers, impacted people's ability to pay, sometimes to pay their energy bills. People's energy usage has changed as well, so people have been at home more.
We stopped charging any tenant's rent that had to close their doors. If you couldn't trade, we didn't charge you rent. Some tenants were lucky enough to receive some grants, so we treated them all as individuals. We worked with them on a one-to-one basis. We've been working like that ever since the original lockdown.
We spoke with our clients in an attempt to truly understand their challenges. And with this information, we changed and moulded our offering to better service their needs.
So Resonance was one of 5 partners to deliver £18 million worth of grant money through the Social Enterprise Support Fund, which came from the National Lotteries Community Fund. It was focused on people who had really been hit by the pandemic, so the monies were prioritised to people who worked with those with physical disabilities, from children who came from disadvantaged backgrounds. Also, it supported BAME communities and LGBTQ+ communities.
We also introduced some NHS lending, which was geared to protect the frontline services by allowing people from the NHS to borrow from us but repay with no interest. So the specific amount of money that they borrowed would be exactly what they paid back. And that was allowing us to help those people not have to worry about their finances outside of work, and they could focus on their job of work when they were at their role.
And the thing that I'm most proud of the University of the West of England in its response is the way our healthcare students and staff and the overall university supported the establishment of the Nightingale Hospital on the university's French A campus.
Yeah, so we made some of our first investments from city funds right at the beginning of lockdown, including one that was with a local community-owned organisation working in renewable energy. And they got planning permission on a wind turbine in September as a result of that investment. So we're really proud to have worked with that group of people and been part of that project happening.
We've responded to COVID-19 by launching the Bristol Bites Back Better campaign, which has just launched this week. The campaign is aiming to give people a chance to participate in the food system in Bristol and helping them to make small changes to make our food system better.
So I think we've had to use this as a real stop and think moment and almost create what we feel is the college of the future. And that involves two things. One is converting the entire business online to deliver online training and delivering a blended mix of online and face-to-face teaching. That's the future of a college, I think.
Like many, we've had to try and ensure that we are actually thinking more about the way that we work and the way that we influence on the planet. And as a result, we've held a number of workshops to try and draw ideas and insights from our partners and key stakeholders about what recovery should look like and how we should be building back better.
Marriott have launched day passes, so which means you could work out from a guest room, no distractions, so to speak, that you would encounter when you're working from home.
So in response to COVID-19, we worked very quickly with Bristol City Council to mobilise a crisis support helpline for micro businesses in Bristol. We operated a number of workshops, online coffee mornings, many different intervention points to make sure that the support was spread far and wide across Bristol.
So we've been making really good use of the IT to enable us to work remotely and more flexibly, to work asynchronously, so to work at different times of the day on the same documents. To help us do what we need to for our customers.
So for us, we've had to be flexible with the workforce. Everybody's got their own situations and issues that they're dealing with, whether that's sending them equipment, giving them extra time to look after little ones or loved ones, or just having a bit more time off.
I see a number of opportunities for Bristol to be fairer, greener and stronger. I think in the first instance there's more connection between people at the moment. While we can't be physically connected, we're more able to meet with each other, to discuss, to share opportunities, and also there's more awareness of what's going on out there.
Our young people told us a year ago that the world needed to change, and we've had a global pandemic that's really disrupted the way that we live and work. And I think we need to then look forward and think, how can we make our city and region fairer, cleaner, and also give opportunities for everyone to thrive following the pandemic.
We don't need to travel into offices, we don't need such large office spaces which then can have a sort of negative carbon impact, which hopefully will make things a little better for the future.
Real practical behaviour changes that will help us create more fair and a more environmentally responsible economy.
We had really big ambitions for 2020.
And the need for community-based voluntary organisations has increased.
It hit us quite hard, but at the same time, we are responding to local issues.
As a racial justice organisation, I think early on at the start of the pandemic, we're very much aware the disproportionate impact the crisis will have on Black and Asian and minority ethnic communities.
It's been decimating, especially within the communities that we do serve, which is the ethnic minorities communities that we do operate in, both financially, people losing their jobs, the levels of sickness that we do have, but also the sheer panic and anxiety that it has left these communities with.
Like most voluntary-led organisations, we've experienced a financial impact within our own business. We found ourselves, along with many others in the voluntary sector, having to apply for funding.
It's clipped our wings, I think, in terms of what we've been able to achieve this year. I think the hardest thing, though, is for our mums, that when we started back in February, we started our training and everybody was full of hope, and hope that they were going to be able to change their lives and change their situations for them and their families. And whilst we have been able to achieve a relative amount of success with them, I think for a lot of them and for everybody, it's just been really hard to kind of see what, something that they'd waited for a very long time, just slipping further and further away.
Me being the optimist, I always try to look at what the positive side is, and I think that is one of the positive side. It allowed us to be able to reflect and to be able to look at the ways that we were doing things in the first place. One thing that we did was we held the first sort of East Central Bristol online digital festival, and we brought things to young people, right from things around well-being through to how to make use of their time crocheting, right through to obviously how they can keep building on their employability skills and in their employability knowledge, which is our core area.
Due to things like broadband poverty and just general kind of not having laptops and things like that, it wasn't really practical for us to be switching everything over to Zoom, and so instead what we did was created short videos for our mums, some short coaching videos that they could watch on their phones, and everything that we've had to do has been with the consideration that this is going to be someone watching it on their phone as and when they can.
The way that we've adapted through the period was really critically looking at how can we use online platforms and how can we also use our social media in a slightly different way. We use social media to engage them, but not necessarily to engage them through sort of learning and personal development.
One of the things that early on that we put in place was around access to information.
So part of our funding applications was to ensure that we had a safe environment in which our staff and volunteers could work in. So we've adapted our studios, offices and ways of working to accommodate this need. Well, COVID has presented the world with the inequalities that existed in our cities and countries and the disproportionate disadvantage felt within certain communities. And this is nothing new. Report after report has highlighted this, with little or no progress made towards addressing the issues.
Everything that we talked about before became quite clear, so everyone could see that around how society is unequal.
The women that we work with are an untapped talent pool. This is hidden talent within the city, and with an influx of more people unfortunately being made unemployed, the temptation will be to only focus on those that are already closer to the market and to the workforce. Whereas actually the recovery needs to be as inclusive as possible, and making sure that those people, as I say, who are already marginalised pre-COVID, don't just get pushed further away and forgotten about.
There's an opportunity here for organisations of all sorts, public, private and third sector, to really embrace the idea of social innovation and not just relegate it to the non-profit sector as it has been in the past, but for them to really embrace it.
Businesses and institutions have a great opportunity to think differently, be more inclusive in their workforce and examine their impact on addressing the environmental changes we're all facing.
What the crisis has clearly demonstrated to all of us is the need to really now move to an action space and beginning to put in interventions to respond on some of those issues around increasing inequality, around issues of sustainability, around issues of fairness. I don't think we can just continue to have the conversations that we've been having. I think we now have enough evidence and we've seen it. Key is, what are the key policy drivers that we need to have in place to really achieve that transformational change that I fundamentally believe we can achieve as we go through this process of building back better.
Thank you to everyone who contributed there. Now, if the technology is working, we should be going to our panellists on the screen behind me. Here we go. Hi, everybody. I hope that you can all hear me.
Yep.
Yes. Fantastic. Now I'm going to say before I forget, this is live, so there is the opportunity to ask questions for our panellists as we go along. There should be a chat box under the screen, or we will also be keeping an eye on Twitter at Bristol24/7. We've already got one question coming, but first I'm going to introduce each of our 5 panellists and then we can get started. So first we've got Jaya Chakrabarti, MBE, the CEO and co-founder of Tisk Report, and among many other things, she's also leading development of an app to help tackle deforestation. Hi, Jaya.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Andrew Dobbs works for Wilmot Dixon, and he is leading the company's regional sustainability development strategy. Hi, Andrew.
Afternoon.
Thanks for joining us. Dr. Zara Nanu is the CEO and co-founder of Gap Square and a leading expert in diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Hi, Zara.
Having me.
Professor Martin Parker is the current lead of the Bristol Inclusive Economy Initiative and also the author of a number of publications, most recent being Life After COVID-19. Hi, Martin.
Hello there.
Hi. And Liam Ronan-Clon, who is the social impact lead for developer First Base. Hi, Liam.
Right, hello, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I understand you perhaps have got to leave a little bit early, Liam, so just holler if you need to go.
Sorry about that.
And everybody, there's plenty of opportunities to have discussions, so please just wave or try and keep a track on everybody. We'll try and hope that everyone can have an equal say on everything. We're obviously discussing how we can help build back greener, fairer, stronger, but I think it's quite helpful to look at the situation now and some of the challenges to that. So Zara, can I go to you, sort of reflect on the situation at the moment and potential barriers to developing a more sustainable and fairer economy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to start the conversation, and my focus is going to be particularly on work and workers in general from a point of view of fairness. I mean, pre-COVID, equality wasn't exactly great. The gender pay gap in the UK was at 18%, stagnating at that for quite a few years. The World Economic Forum was saying globally the gender pay gap is at 70%. If you look at ethnicity and race, the gender pay gap, or the pay gap alone for different ethnic groups, is even higher than that. And the World Economic Forum was already increasing its estimations in terms of when the gap will be closed, and they were telling us something like 157 years. From January 2020. Now, we know it's only been like 9 months since the pandemic, 10 months, but it has felt like all of the 257 years. And what we've seen over the past few months is how the gender pay gap has increased. Women have kind of been affected by the pandemic twofold. On one hand, they've been key essential workers in front lines in the face of nurses and care workers, and they have had to go to work and front the pandemic right there. And on the other hand, women who were able to work from home have had to do 2 jobs at the same time in terms of caring responsibilities, homeschooling, as well as having a job. And that's having a significant impact on what the economy currently looks like. Now, besides COVID, the World Economic Forum has also produced a report in terms of the future of jobs in the run-up to 2025. And if you look at that future of jobs, you can see the high rise of kind of a lot of digital and tech jobs, but they're currently jobs that are dominated by men, and actually the conversations around those roles are led by white, middle-aged, middle-class Californians. So we really have to be careful about how we use that to reshape how we view the economy going forward.
Thanks, Sarah. So essentially, we're not so far going in the right direction in many ways. Martin, would you agree on that?
Yeah, so I was just thinking, white, middle class, middle aged. The only thing I'm not is Californian, so apologies, but it goes anywhere. I mean, yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and COVID has exposed the bones of the social structure much more brutally, I think, than many of us are comfortable with. with, as Zara and plenty of other people have pointed out, some of the poorest paid people have been the most essential and also the most vulnerable in terms of their exposure to the virus. I guess one of the things that tells us is if we're going to be talking about building back better, then this involves transfer of power and resources. Okay, it's not going to be a kind of a simple process in which everybody agrees that this is the best of all possible worlds. It's going to involve challenging a whole range of vested interests in terms of the distributions of power, responsibility, control, and so on. The other biggest barrier, though, I think, and one that I want to kind of put on the table early, is the lack of a kind of inspiring visions, in a sense. So very often the difficulties I think we have in terms of talking about social change are that we are told that the present isn't very satisfactory, and that's pretty clear, particularly as we're careering towards environmental collapse. But we don't have any kind of inspiring visions about what the future, a better future, might look like. And I think that's something I hope that we'll come back to during this conversation, the importance of having some idea about what a better world might be as a way of galvanizing action.
Thanks, Martin. Jaya, I feel like you probably have an idea of what that vision could be, and obviously you work in tech as well, which is one of those sectors that's growing. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I do feel that we're starting with a point of overwhelm. So many people are completely overwhelmed by their situation. They may be in precarious jobs. And we kind of need to start from basics. So if we're looking at a more inclusive, sustainable economy, then some of it has got to start with paying people fairly. And Zara's already mentioned about the gender pay gap, the ethnicity pay gap, and that there are other inequalities that we're not seeing. We haven't even started to address what's happening with disability. And we have to look at our own workforces first before we start going out. So, CSR begins within your own workforce, and then with your contractors, and then beyond. So we have to start establishing the better way to do business. I had a business that very nearly ended up not being a business and going out of business because I had a major client that didn't pay us for 18 months. And it pushed us to the edge, and there was nowhere for us to go with that. They had a bigger legal department. We have to do business more ethically if we want to see ethical change. So that's where I'd probably start. Living wage, paying people on time, keeping your promises, real integrity stuff.
Thank you. Andrew, can I go to you now? Obviously, construction sector, another one that's you're very reliant on a wide supply chain, and I know you're doing a lot of work in sort of the future of construction practices. So what are your thoughts on this, the sort of the current situation and how things could or should be changing?
Yeah, I think some really interesting points. If I just flick the conversation a little bit onto the built environment itself, we are continuing to build significant infrastructure in this country, which does not meet even our current demands, let alone our future demands. And every day we are continuing now to contribute to a growing problem of infrastructure, which we're going to have to rectify in a relatively small space of time. Construction infrastructure accounts for around about 40% of global carbon emissions. It's a significant contributor to climate change, and so we need a really rapid and dramatic shift in the way that we start to think about and value the places we live in, we work in, we have healthcare for people, and we educate people. All of this infrastructure that we're continuing to build is just not suitable to meet our future needs, and all the issues the other panelists have talked about also feed into that capability to deliver, because all of that is we need to really think about our supply chains, our ethical and responsible supply chains, ethical and responsible sourcing of materials, understanding the provenance of where our materials are coming from. All of these things feed into that. It's a huge and complex supply chain that is affected by all of these issues, and we've got very little time to deal with it. I mean, I think one of the things that COVID has demonstrated to us as a species, if you like, is how quickly we can respond to dramatic problems, and we can adapt. I think we do slow things down considerably by bureaucracy and imposed constraints, which really we could remove quite quickly, and we did. We built Nightingale hospitals in exceptionally rapid time, so we can respond. But this frailty, the human condition about fear of change, and we need, I guess, in a way, I've talked about this many times, we need to create these artificial COVID moments that create significant shift in our thinking that drive, some dramatic change.
I totally agree there. Just remembering a conversation I had with someone in construction, massive, great big company. I said, what would make everything change? Do things more ethically? And he said, the threat of a PR nightmare.
That's very telling, isn't it?
I think pandemic trumps it.
But I guess we are leading quite nicely on to what is changing. Liam, I'm aware we haven't come to you yet. First Base is a property developer that is working on the former Gardner Haskins building in Old Market. So that's an area that really bridges sort of the city centre where a lot of the sort of thriving economy is, and then areas where people don't necessarily benefit from some of that wealth. So what do you think could be done differently? What's changing? How can we help things along?
Yeah, it's one of the most. So the former Gardner Haskins warehouse is in Lawrence Hill ward, which is one of the most deprived wards, not just in Bristol but in the country, and we're very aware of that. I think like a few of the panelists have said already, coronavirus has further emphasised our inequalities and our capitalist system. And I think as a property developer and somebody who's investing millions of hundreds of millions of pounds into a place with a long-term view, we don't just want to pile all that cash into building buildings and then just leave it done at that. What we want to do is invest in the community around us, and also just from a value perspective, what's the point in investing all that cash in some nice shiny buildings when if the community around it isn't necessarily benefiting from that? Because where's the long-term value in doing something like that? So that's one of the reasons why we work with the Social Value Portal, who I think are also working with Bristol City Council on their procurement policy. And procurement, although it used to really bore me a few years ago, I've realised I've become a convert to how procurement can really change people's lives and how progressive you can be with the right procurement policies. So we're also working with Cognitive Paths and Black South West Network on quite a progressive procurement policy for the SOAP works, where not only are we committing to buying social and buying local, we're also trying to work with Cognitive Paths to make sure that businesses run by BAME management, whether that's voluntary sector organisations or profit-making businesses, can benefit from our supply chain directly, and then also benefit from training sessions and events that we're hoping to put on, which will then indirectly benefit them on other supply chain and other tender opportunities, so that the community begins to feel the benefit of the investment that we're making. And we just think it's the right thing to do, and responsible, and other investors and businesses that are investing in Bristol should be doing this to build back better and try and aim for an inclusive and sustainable recovery.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Does anyone want to come back on any of the points raised already? We've got, I think, 3 questions that have come in, so I'll probably start on it. Zara.
Yeah, no, just quickly going back to Martin's point about how we pay different roles. I was looking at a list this morning of the best paid jobs in the UK, and we have someone like a chief financial officer earning £112,000 a year, or a person in sales earning more than £110,000 a year. And then we have nurses and paramedics on 24,000, care workers on 18,000, we have teachers on 25,000. So in terms of value we assign to those roles, I think this is a time when we can reconsider why those lower paid roles are valued so little in our current society.
Yeah, their value is really being shown to be utmost, doesn't it? That actually ties in quite well with the questions coming from Finn, who is watching. And Finn said, what role do financial institutions have to play in helping small business recover from the pandemic? And how have small business needs from financial service providers changed as a result of COVID? So is there someone that will say that? Perhaps one of Dea, you run your own business?
Yeah, I do. So, for banks, for example, I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but speaking from a personal perspective, we're all still paying mortgages, and there are some who are less able to keep that up than others. Lots of people are paying rent to people who are paying mortgages. We need to, if we were able to bail out the banks, I would hope that there would be a way for the banks to bail those of us out that need it. I'm not a banker. I know it's complicated. It's very complicated, and they will tell you that it is not as simple as turning off those payments. But I do believe that being able to spread your payments, lower them, go down to interest only for a lot longer, those sorts of things will see people through. And we are facing massive, massive homelessness and destabilization coming up, not just because of the pandemic. Have we mentioned the word Brexit, or do I get the prize?
I think you do. Yeah, it's been slightly dwarfed by the pandemic, but it's coming up less than a month, isn't it, before the...
Well, yeah, and I don't think, if we conflate the two, that's dangerous, but equally, we can't underestimate the impact that there will be on jobs, on homes, on medication drying up, because, you know, they'll all be sort of in that car park in Kent where they're filling it up with toilets for people, as opposed to, you know, being able to get things going. We do have to start to look at that kind of resilience, and a lot of it looks, we have to look at our biggest expenditure, and a lot of it is, you know, our homes. So yeah, I do plead to banks to just, you know, get their heads together and look at this, because it is within their power to go down to interest only without losing much. Yeah, I would hope that that's there. Martin, I know that you're going to go for it.
Yeah, Martin.
Just to kind of, I suppose, to re-emphasize just how, you know, substantial the nature of this challenge is. So, you know, for the last 30 or 40 years, particularly in this country, after Thatcher and the idea of kind of kitchen sink economics and all the rest of it, we seem to have been encouraged to believe that the market is the best solution, and that various forms of cooperation will be able to save us through, you know, behaving with purpose or whatever it might be. I think one of the things that the COVID moment, to use Andrew's nice framing there, has done is to expose the real difficulties of this within an economy that has, in a sense, relied on market-based solutions to solve lots of its problems. You know, we were told a couple of years ago that there was no magic money tree, right? That the policies of the Labour government, of potential Labour government, were unaffordable, blah 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 blah. We've suddenly found there's an entire forest of magic money trees if we want them. And particularly in terms of bailing out the banks, which was, you know, a decade ago, but you know, in terms of the kind of the entirely justifiable spending that's been, well, not all of it, but most of it has been taking place over the last couple of years. Now, if that's the case, that effectively means that politically it is now much easier to mobilize in favor of something like the Green New Deal, for example. So very large amounts of infrastructure spending, which will stimulate demand and jobs, and all the rest of it's going to be a job-heavy stuff in terms of retrofitting houses and thinking about the sort of green infrastructure that Andrew is talking about and so on. So that level of collective mobilization is absolutely necessary, and we have to get away from the idea that the market is going to solve these problems.
Andrew, we talked about a bit about development and construction there. Is that something you'd agree with? Do we need to rip everything up and relook at the entire economic model?
I think absolutely, yeah. I think, you know, capitalism is having an existential crisis, and you know, if you look at you know, you look at the extreme version in America, and they just don't know what to do. You know, they've got it's a very simplistic sort of formula that they operate, and they've and without any social context, they find themselves floundering because it's, you know, people are not spreadsheets. And I think it's really important that you know, the consumerism and capitalism and economic model of the future is rounded by this social responsibility, and you know, and is our understanding of what value is needs to evolve and change significantly, and what we understand by value. And I think there's a document issued this week on the construction playbook, which will replace the sort of European procurement rules next year. And there's some interesting things in that about a shift towards outcomes and value-based procurement. And I think those offer some genuine hope that actually we will move away from just basic value, cost and quality questioning, which is not delivering on the type of infrastructure and economic multiplier effects that can be achieved by investment. We spend a lot of time with social, looking at social investment within our business, and we understand the impacts that activity, particularly construction activity, can have within a community, and if that can be sustained and supported over a long term, it becomes self-perpetuating. I think it's really important. Everybody needs to have purpose in their life, and given wherever you are in society, no matter what job you do, people need purpose. There's an old anecdote from JFK in the 60s when he was walking around NASA, and he spoke to a guy sweeping the floor and said, what do you do? And he said, I help put men on the moon. He understood his purpose, and he was motivated in that role. And it doesn't matter where you are, what job you do. I think we've lost, as one of the panelists referred to in the salaries, we've lost perspective on what value is right throughout the chain, and in many ways we're rewarding the wrong people. People who grow our food in the fields are doing the hard work. They're getting the least amount of money in our value chains at the moment, and I think we need the new form of social and green capitalism needs to have a real think. But I think there's huge opportunity in and around that, and we're starting to see some early signs of that, I think, as we move back towards this idea of local spend.
Thanks, Andrew. Liam, I know you had your hand up, so if we go to you and then look at perhaps moving things on to where these opportunities are.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Andrew made some really good points there, and the impacts economy is really exciting and has a lot of opportunities, especially when it comes to sort of social impact bonds that we're only just beginning to sort of see the benefits of that. ESG investment, especially since coronavirus and the declaration of climate emergencies, has people's interest in investing in ESG peaked, and also I think investors as well, highlighting outcomes as part of their investment. So we're working with an investor on a project in Milton Keynes at the minute, and they deliberately social and environmental outcomes to achieve. So we've been chosen as their partner because we're committed to achieving social value, to setting new benchmarks for sustainability, and hopefully we can continue in that direction, and businesses can be rewarded for doing the right thing.
Okay, thank you. One of the questions that's come in is from John. Does it always need a crisis like COVID to force meaningful change? I mean, I'd say we probably haven't really got into whether we're actually implementing change yet or not, but is there anyone that wants to take that? Zara, what are your thoughts?
I think it's really easy to get caught up in the status quo. It's really easy to be like, this is how things are done, so we're just going to continue doing them until what happens is a crisis that kind of means that you have to do things differently. And I definitely see it in working with large organizations across the UK, but also beyond the UK. There's actually an open willingness to do things differently right now. So people are waiting and want to engage with organizations and ideas that mean that they will do things differently and get different outcomes. Because if they continue to do things the way they do them right now, businesses will collapse. We see more businesses interested in shifting their models away from shareholder capitalist models, where their articles of association talk about how the company is first and foremost liable to the shareholders before it's liable to any stakeholders. So we see a lot of large and small companies starting to think and look at models that mean that they put their stakeholders, their supply chains, their buyers of their services and their products at the heart of what they do. So there's definitely, I see that appetite, and as Martin was saying earlier, it's an interesting point. It's the lack of kind of interesting, exciting vision that everyone can grab into to move forward differently.
Yeah, because you make quite a strong case for for why it's actually better for a business to work and be inclusive, diverse, have that sort of a new model of doing business. So, but it does feel like there's quite a big bridge to get there at the moment. Martin, you've written books on how we rip everything up and start a new economy. How do we start this? Because we're starting from quite a low starting point, I guess, in many ways.
Yeah, and I mean, people have talked about a whole bunch of different metaphors for thinking about crisis and opportunity and stuff, isn't there? One of the ones I kind of like is that re-engineering the economy is like re-engineering a jet whilst it's in flight. You know, there are so many different aspects of this problem, whether you think about construction issues or transport or food or whatever else it might be. Virtually, all sectors of our lives are implicated. One of the really important things to start off with, I think, though, is about this question of value. There's a great series of lectures currently being given on Radio 4 by Mark Carney, the ex-governor of the Bank of England, who's just a smart guy. And his first lecture was talking about the disconnect between the two senses in which we use the word value. So one, obviously, tending towards questions of financial value. So normally when you're talking, in the boardrooms and on the spreadsheet and so on about value, you're talking about numerical values and the way in which they influence decision making and provide particular kinds of surplus for certain sorts of people and so on. But obviously in commonsensical language, we also talk about value in terms of things that we care about. And those things that we care about are very often not priced and very, very difficult to price, in terms of the value of your family or of love or of a good meal or whatever it might be. All that kind of stuff seems to occupy almost a different kind of universe, in a sense, to the universe of financial value. There's a part of what we need to do is create an economy that genuinely values the things that we as human beings value. And that includes stuff like trees. Not just as abstract entities that produce carbon, but as things that give us joy and love and all the rest of it. Okay, so I think we need to kind of refound the way that we think about economy, and instead of imagining it as stuff that happens with money, think about it as ways in which we engineer collective flourishing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about connectedness between those things, and building your values, building your networks around your values as well. As in, you are who you do business with, you are who you buy from, you are who you spend your money with. You vote every single day with your hard-earned cash. And the other thing is about trust, isn't it? That the infrastructure that we're missing, that we've eroded away to the point of no one believing the experts anymore, we need to rebuild that trust if we're going to be able to achieve any of it, I think. Society is built on that promise, isn't it? That you give your hard-earned cash in terms of taxes to an organization of human beings that will provide you with a safe place to live, to work, to raise your children, to become educated, to make the world a better place. It's supposed to be that. We've lost sight of that. We have, and it's all over the world, not just here in the UK, not just the divides we're seeing, and that infrastructure too, not just our supply chains, but our value chains, yes.
My question would be how we then start to rebuild the trust.
For me, I think, speaking as a developer who everybody trusts loads, we've got a massive uphill battle to build trust with the people that we work with, which is one of the reasons why we try and measure our outcomes. So one of the reasons why we're working with the social value portal is so that we can show our action plan as a public document and then measure and report on the action plan for at least 10 years. The people hold us to account to the commitments that we made, at the plan applications. And it'd be great if other developers could be doing that as well, because it would, as an industry, it would really help to build trust, rather than communities feeling like they're constantly being done over.
I suppose it's that long-term thing. Sorry, yes, carry on. I've got another question as well, but carry on, Martin.
Yeah, Liam, I saw your social value statement about a year ago, and it was a really impressive document. Is it available online somewhere? Because people might be interested in looking at that.
It is, and what I'll do is I'll just share it with you to share, because it's got a URL that's about a sentence long.
Sure, yeah. It's just a good way of paying out what you just said, that's all.
Of course.
And absolutely, it's about transparency. So that is sharing that statement and living by it. If we are transparent in real times, not just 12 months after year end, as most businesses seem to think that's what it means, but radical transparency, and I'm talking about less than 30 days, between what you're doing and reporting what you're doing. And if everyone saw that as a new business as usual, we'd be able to see change, because we can influence it within those timeframes. We can't within 12 months.
I'm going to come on to the question from Angela, I think. Could donor economics provide a better economic model that Bristol could pursue? Martin, you're nodding there.
Yeah, so I should explain for those people who don't know what that term means. Donut economics was a term coined by the economist Kate Raworth, who basically suggests that human life exists within two sorts of limits. There's the natural limits of the environment, the ecosystem, etc., etc., and then the kind of social limits of the sort of life that we would like to live. And it's a really interesting sort of model, because it allows us to think about various sorts of trade-offs, in a sense, between our environmental constraints and our, if you like, social aspirations of different kinds. It's a model that's been taken up in a whole variety of places. Probably the key one for these purposes is in the city of Amsterdam, who are now trying to apply donut economics to the kind of decision making that they're interested in. It would be lovely to see these kind of ideas get taken up within Bristol. And there's lots of aspects of donut economics, which obviously, it's a fairly holistic way of thinking about environmental and social systems. But it would be really interesting to see whether it could be applied in a city in the UK.
Sorry, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, because you work in a global realm. What do you think that's something that could work if as a city, say, we adopted it, but working within the wider economy?
I certainly think it's definitely time to experiment and try new things. We've been talking about how we need to move towards a new normal and a new way of doing things since March. That's nearly 10 months. And I think we should be well past the conversations around what should we do and well into experimenting. And it doesn't have to be a citywide and large experiment. It could be a community-led experiment. It could be trying things out and then talking about the good practice that comes out of it. And I think this is where also trust comes in, because people will want to trust what they're experimenting and what they're trying out. And transparency is a big thing of that, as Jaya said. But also talking about things in a more simplified ways, because economics has been confined to kind of a group of experts and economists for a very long time, and you had like acronyms like GDP and EBIT and other things that aren't necessarily understandable to people, and they disengaged with these conversations. So we need to simplify the language and make it more understandable so we can engage more people with that. And I think there's one particular group that we should really engage in this conversation, and that's young people. I think we don't have enough young people voices actually participating in this conversation and bringing a lot of excitement into it and a lot of their energy and drive. So, yeah.
I think that's a really good point. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, am I okay to just jump in on that? I think excellent point about young people, and also as well as sort of social value and procurement. We're also looking at the One Planet Living framework, which we're trying to measure ourselves against as well, which is quite similar to the donut economics model in terms of trying to live within your means and making sure that our development can be ready for a zero carbon world. But in terms of donut economics, One Planet Living, UN Sustainable Development Goals, all great ideas, but it can often be a sort of preserve of academics, middle class sort of dinner table conversations, and whereas the people who are really who are probably most impacted by it aren't necessarily aware of these principles and how they can get involved. So that's one of the reasons why we've sponsored the Black and Green Ambassador Programme in Bristol, and we think that's a crucial way to get particularly our local residents involved in this really important topic of the inclusive economy and sustainability from the bottom up and the top down. I think that's the other way around, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Andrew, I guess construction again is something that is a growing sector and one that potentially does employ a lot of young people. Do you feel the same, that it's time to give them more of a voice?
Absolutely, and construction's got a big sort of PR problem, to be honest, because you look at even pre-COVID, we had a massive skills shortage, which was worsening. Our biometrics on our sites show that our workforce is 40 to 50 white male, and it's an aging workforce, and it's dwindling. So the whole thing about construction is that in society it hasn't been placed as an attractive sector within which to work. It's sitting alongside many other trades. We've developed a sort of service-based economy which rewards really a narrow field of people, lawyers, doctors, with high salaries, but actually that creates a very narrow economy. If you take the German model, they would put apprenticeships on a level playing field with those. They are key people, but we just need to balance things out a bit. We've got too much imbalance in the pay structures and the job structures, I think. So construction has got to go through a significant change, and that change is going to be around the way that we do construct in the 21st century. We're largely using techniques from the Roman times, gluing brick on brick. And actually the future is not going to be that. We are going to be looking at high-level manufacturing jobs, move into off-site, increasing amounts of work done off-site, moving less materials and labour to remote parts of the country to put things together and create loads of waste. But the model is starting to change, the thinking is starting to change. And creating a new sort of work environment and a new ambition for construction, I think, will start to open up those jobs. I mean, in my field, I look after sort of sales and marketing as well, and business development. We've got bid writers, graphic designers. There are jobs in construction that people don't even think about that are there now, which were not there 20, 30 years ago. So it's a very wide skill set now. Digital engineers. There's a whole raft of new skills required to deliver construction in the 21st century, and we need to get into schools and with younger people and just open their eyes as to the opportunities. And actually, coming through this, I feel very fortunate being in construction, because construction is proven to be a resilient sector, and it is going to be a sector that's going to be leading us out of this pandemic as well as a driving force. And so it's really important that we don't lose sight of the numbers of people that we're going to need as well going forward to meet the demand of the future.
So essentially, there's an appetite for change, and it's also being driven by a need to fulfil those skills gaps.
Absolutely, yeah. We've just got to think, we have to, as others have said, we've just got to really throw the rule books out. The status quo isn't going to work. We can't, to use another metaphor, we've got to have a bit of a Tesla moment here as well. We can't keep tinkering with the diesel engine. We've got to chuck that out and have something completely new. We are working, and one of the challenges we have is this transition. We've created this huge global economy with these huge global behemoths and supply chains, and I quite like the phrase, this sort of globalization. Really, think globally, act locally. That those global supply chains are going to be there, but somehow that's got to have a real local context, as Liam talked about. At the end of the day, you've got to get out and talk to people on the street. You've got to engage with the final people in the chain that are on the recipient end of your value. You've got to understand those really, really well, and you have to tailor everything that in your business. You're ultimately serving them, and however your organisation is constructed, however your supply chain is constructed, it has to be focused at that local point, at that individual, and not at the big end. And I think we've lost scale of it. We focus on, look how big we are, and actually it comes down to an individual at the end. And I think this, in the last couple of years, we've had a stark reminder of how things can go badly wrong, certainly from a construction perspective with Grenfell.
Sure.
And the horrible events and the evidence that is coming out from Grenfell now is just awful, absolutely staggering. That's some of the things that have taken place in large organisations that have lost connection with what the business they're in and actually who they're serving. So I think that whole thing needs to be rebalanced.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to go to another question, and this is from Eleanor. How has the pandemic increased understanding of in-work poverty, those less visible than unemployed but not necessarily financially better off working are now also in greater danger? And how do we do better? Is there anyone that wants to take that one? Jaya?
I'll give it a start. Well, certainly we are seeing that the increase in use of food banks is rocketing. We have seen masses of child poverty and hunger. And these are from families that are working. In-work poverty was rising before COVID, and it was rising before we had Brexit and all of the other things start to sort of enter our horizons. And the pandemic has made it worse, and we know about key workers and how they are not only what we rely upon within our society, but also they're the most vulnerable. They're the ones that are facing homelessness because they cannot keep up with their rent as well as everything else. The pandemic has shown us all of the ugly things. There is hope too within the pandemic, but we have seen how weak our systems are for taking care of those who aren't being paid enough in the first place to be able to be resilient now. They don't have the savings. I do believe that we have to look at that right now. We have to look at all of that within our own supply chains, within all the businesses that we walk past every morning, or we used to when we were working in the towns. We have to reconnect with those and understand what their situations are.
So it's about being accountable as a business and also as a consumer. Zara, yes.
Very sorry. I'm just going to leave now, as I said.
Thanks for joining us, Liam, and sorry you have to leave. Bye. Zara, I'll carry on, and then I can see other people wanting to speak.
Yeah, so 2 points really. I think we need to come back to the real living wage, and I'm really proud to see so many businesses in Bristol sign up to the real living wage and actually do that. So that's really good to see. And also the fact that we can only change what we measure and what we see through indicators. And we're currently guided by this blinding number that is the GDP, that is somehow an indication of economic performance. And while it is an indication of some performance, it actually doesn't speak to equality and the distribution of that growth across the population. So we need to revisit how we have a number that actually is reflective of the unpaid work that happens behind the scene, that is reflective of the lower paid roles and how we bring more value into those in terms of revenue. And then we can start tracking that and we can make real change. But that needs to be reflected in the wider number that we look towards when policies are made, when decisions are taken at government level or company level.
So it's not just businesses signing up to be accountable, it's also actually those wider institutions holding them to account and making this happen. Martin, I think you were keen to speak on that.
Yeah, I suppose, lots of people have been talking about the lessons of COVID, as if the tiny bug is teaching us stuff. And there was an earlier question about sort of crisis and opportunity and so on. One of the things that we can see in lots of social crises is not so much that things have changed radically, it's just that we actually see them in a way. So, for example, we think about the financial crisis of 10 years ago, although it resulted in precious little change to the way in which the banking sector works, it was clear to many people there just what crazy speculation much of conventional banking was based on sort of insane derivatives of derivatives and derivatives. They exposed that quite clearly, the casino aspects of capitalism, for example. The Indian writer Arundhati Roy has written about COVID as a bit like a kind of an acid that's cut through the skin of the social and allows us to see its bones more clearly. So anybody who's interested in these things would know that care workers are badly paid, that BAME people do tend to do more dangerous and low paid jobs, etc., etc. This kind of stuff was known. COVID showed it to us more clearly. It exposed it, and exposed it, in the most brutal ways, in mortality rates.
Absolutely. Zara, did you have your hand up there? Or no, don't make that up. What I feel like I think we've got probably about 15 minutes left, and we've spent quite a lot of time sort of looking at the situation now and some of the negatives. Where are the opportunities here? We've said how we need to change. How, I suppose, do we go about doing that? So, Jaya?
Okay, so number one, if you run a business, commit it to transparency, as in who you're buying from. If you're able to, given contracts, you can talk about who's buying from you as well. You can look at whether or not you've got living wage employers in your supply chain now for free. That's what we set up to do. You can do that now. You can do that with social enterprises and see how many you're buying from if you're going to buy more social. Start making statements about how much you're buying from, the types of organizations that will change the world. But also, if you don't have much money, or if you have a £5 a month you can commit it to, find entities within your city that need that money to survive. You've got Fair Share Bristol, you've got investing in independent journalism, so Bristol24, there are all sorts of entities that you can invest in month on month with the pennies that you've got that would aggregate into something real. You can take steps no matter what you've got. And if you don't have the cash and you've got the time, then invest your actions too. There is a lot you can do with the mutual aid movements that have been growing up, but you can help sustain them. If you've got leaders that are emerging that need just a little bit of help or a little bit of encouragement, well mentor them, support them. I mean, those of us who've been in sort of leading business for a good long while, we're not going to be around forever. We need to make sure that our next generation leaders are strong enough to be able to carry what we are trying to build. There's plenty to do. Pick what you think you can do and then take a deep breath. You can't do it all. Pick what you can focus on and keep your sanity.
Those small steps.
Absolutely. It's just picking something and doing something. Don't let the overwhelm stop you doing anything. Pick one thing, do one thing.
That's well said. There's a few more questions coming in, so what I might do is go on to them because they tie in well. So this is sort of focused a lot on what individuals can do. Someone, doesn't say who, but they've asked, what are the top 3 things businesses operating in Bristol should commit to in 2021 to achieve a greener, fairer, stronger economy? So I could ask each of you your thoughts on that if I can. So Andrew.
I think from a business perspective, you've got to start with your leadership, and you've got to be courageous and authentic. And if you don't have those 2 things to start with, everything you do after that starts to get compromised. I think there's so many things that you need to do in a business, but you need courageous leadership with a clear direction and vision, and you need to be authentic.
Thank you, Anne. Zara?
Yeah, I can add to that. I think that's absolutely right in terms of leadership and courage. And I think about the metrics that you take to the boardroom regularly and why those metrics are being taken to the boardroom, and why metrics around sustainability, around inclusivity, around the wellness of the workforce perhaps doesn't always make it as a top headline in the boardroom, and change that, because by changing indicators by which you measure success, you can really change the actions of what happens then in the company. If the indicator stays the same, and you're looking at profit made only, or you look just at turnover, then not a lot is going to change in terms of company behavior.
Thank you. Martin, do you want to add your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I want to, all those are great points. I just want to come back to the idea of vision. About the idea of a different sort of society and economy, because it seems to me that that's really important in terms of galvanizing people's action. One of the difficulties in advocating for social and economic change is we're on this idea that it's imagined that we're taking things away, that people can't have what they had in the past and so on. It's this sort of a sort of an image of people who are interested in green politics or red politics or whatever as being somehow Scrooges who are going to stop us having the nice stuff. And I think it's really important to reverse that and to paint pictures of a Bristol, of a society which is fairer, which is cleaner, in which we can have food which is grown locally and transportation solutions which are easy and cheap, etc., etc. That this needs to be one of the kind of the goals of the movement of movements, in a sense. Because it's that that's going to make the politics of this work. If we get identified as people who are just kind of kicking over the present without substituting a vision of a desirable future, then we're not going to get very far.
Thank you. And Jaya, did you want to add anything about what businesses should be changing now?
I probably all said it already, but I'll say it again because it's so important. Number one, pay the real living wage to your people. Number two, pay your suppliers on time so they can pay the real living wage to their people. Number three, be transparent about the fact that you're doing it and who you're not doing it with. And then repeat, keep going.
Amazingly put, thank you. Now we've got another, I think this is probably the final question so far, and there's probably, I think we've got another 5 minutes or so if anyone does want to ask any last minute questions. But someone has said, can we co-create and launch people's assemblies for building back fairer, greener, stronger? So I suppose that's moving beyond business into a wider society. Any thoughts on that? Martin?
I know that there are moves in this direction with the City Council, ideas about sort of procedural forms of democracy which bring groups of Bristol citizens together in order to debate what kind of future they'd like to see. Ideas about youth parliament have also been discussed. I mean, it was mentioned about the notion that it's really important to be focusing on young people in these kind of discussions. More generally, I think that there is a big problem in people feeling that they don't have control over the economy, that the economy is something that happens elsewhere, that happens to them. Sometimes, you know, one of my taglines is the idea of the economy as a nervous beast that lives in New York, London, and Tokyo, and kind of takes fright when bad things happen. You know, that sort of idea. I think we need to focus on the idea of giving people a sense of efficacy, of control over the economy, and to reinforce the notion that what they do makes a difference, whether that's in terms of the decisions they make in their own workplace or the consumption decisions they make, or their activism in terms of trying to tilt the economy towards a different kind of norm.
Thank you, Mai. I'd be quite interested to go a little bit back to how we involved everyone in this, because I mean our main focus today is how businesses can lead that, but it's only going to work if everybody, including sort of the unemployed, those that are at the very bottom of businesses, are engaged as well. Zara, your thoughts on how to do that?
I think just kind of this would follow on from what Martin just was saying about involving everyone in the economy and simplifying concepts and language to the extent that people actually see that them taking the kids to school and them helping a neighbor when they have a hard time and can't go to the shop and buy their food is part of the economy. So, and it should be a rewarded part of the economy, not one that just happens outside of it. So its language has a lot to do with it and how we view and understand economics. And also, like as I said, involving a lot more young people into these conversations. We might sometimes think that maybe young people don't have the experience necessary or the knowledge necessary, but actually they could bring a lot more to the table than we think.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to comment on that? How we involve everyone?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. There's a great book, Matty Said, Black Box Thinking, which goes into the failures in organisations that have these assumptions that people who are in senior positions know everything. And the health system's a great example of that, and the opposite, I suppose, is something like the airline industry, which hence the title of the book comes from, and how they learn from failure. And I think there is a huge amount to be that can be added, and research will add this anyway, around diversity and age diversity as well, to conversations that broadens our decision making. The challenges are fixed mindsets and thinking, which we all have. And so when you put a group of similar people who know each other really, really well, guess what? They come out with a similar sort of response to most things most of the time. So shaking that up is really, really important. And young people, you know, come at things in a different way, and that really does force you to think. And those are, going back to my earlier point about these COVID moments, you can create these tiny ripple COVID moments with things like that. Those, they just shock you, they just jolt you, and they just stop you and just get you to engage, even if it's momentarily, in thinking differently, and that can lead you in a different direction. So I think, you know, it's really, really important. We look at it a lot in our organisation about how we get the young people into our decision making and thinking, how we can get them involved in the business from the ground up.
Really good points, thank you.
I can come in on that actually very quickly if I may.
Of course.
If we want our young people involved, then we must start with schools. We have to start with schools. If I'm getting more involved with my son's school at the moment, and one of the key questions at the moment because of the pandemic is how many of those children are not getting meals? How many of those families do not have the technology to do homeschooling using laptops, and how many do not have the data the data to be able to manage to do their homework in time before it all runs out? If we can establish a strong core community within schools, everything starts to follow. And then you can get the businesses in to talk about how those well-fed, well-educated, access to everything kind of children can get involved with our world. We must take care of the basics. So I'm hoping I'll be able to do that with my son's school, and I'm really hoping that other people who feel that they can do so with their own schools will step up and do so. There's so much to be done.
I guess it's a really good point for anyone who does feel that they don't have the power, that it's all overwhelming. That is one thing that almost anyone could do. I know we're pretty much running out of time, but if I could perhaps go to each panelist in turn just to kind of give it a really brief summary of what you want to see change, how things can now move beyond a conversation and change for the better. I'll go around what I can see, so if I can start with you, Andrew.
For me, it's about value and having a really very new and different relationship with value, and connecting that to what we really want. You know, I think you know, it's been said earlier about this confusion with value in its various definitions. From a construction point of view, we confuse value and cost often, and those are two very, very different things. So I think we need to really understand what it is in society as a species we value, and we have to have commercial models which reflect that, so our decision making is significantly more balanced and delivers the things we need. As I said, we're building stuff today which we don't really want, and we won't be able to afford them, because in a few years' time we'll have to put them right.
Thank you. Really good points. Jaya.
Mine's probably a bit more complicated, but I would say the one thing I'd want to change or re-establish is trust. We have talked about it again and again, but the erosion of trust has meant that we have dehumanized so many different issues. And so instead, people who are in desperate need become refugees, or they become asylum seekers, or they become, you know, people who are complaining about race or gender. Or honestly, I do think that if we can re-establish trust, we can have those conversations and rehumanize what needs to be rehumanized, so that this planet and us can work together better.
Thank you. Martin.
I don't think there's one thing.
I know, it's quite...
If there is one thing, it's pulling the economic back into the social. So lots of economists have commented, lots of kind of historical economists have commented on the way in which we gradually imagine the economy as something which is different to the rest of society, and somehow runs by different rules with different sorts of ethics and assumptions and all the rest of it. I think what's crucial now is to pull the economic back in. People have talked about it being disembedded. Let's re-embed it, and that way we can integrate the two senses of value that I've been talking about and Andrew picked up on. That'll do.
Thank you, Martin. And Zara.
Yeah, everything else has been kind of pretty well summed up. I'm going to be the data person and say, let's change the metrics that we measure success by, so that any change we implement going forward, we can really track based on what we want to achieve.
Amen.
Brilliant, Yuka. Thank you so much, everyone. Sorry that it always goes really, really fast, but thank you for joining me, and thank you for everybody that was watching today.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Now,
Thank you.
I think we've got a short film that's just a couple of minutes about the Sustainable Development Goals, and then I'll be handing over to Jake and Dan from Tusco.
Choose life. Choose business as usual. Choose polluting the sea, the air, the planet. Choose floods, storms and fires. Choose inaction, denial, waste, convenience. Choose overheating, overmeeting, overdepleting. Choose destruction. These are the choices we were making. Then along comes pandemic. Pause. Lockdown. Out of nowhere. The big wake-up call for us all. So how do we recover? How do we progress? New choices. Big, bold, brave and beautiful choices. Choose greener, cleaner, smarter, sweeter. Choose kindness. Choose goodness. Choose joy. Choose nature. Full moons, lagoons, mountains, valleys, life on Earth. Choose reforestation, clean energy protecting our oceans. Choose radical policy change, system change. Choose a healthy economy, sustainable business. Choose a new normal, a brighter, safer next normal. Choose science. Choose less than 1.5 degrees temperature change. Choose the Paris Agreement and sticking to it. Zero carbon, zero waste, zero hate. Choose love. Choose massive regeneration in this generation. Choose brighter, better, all together.
Good afternoon, everybody. That was a great film. We're really happy to be here today. My name is Jake Smith, and this is Dan Grixty from Tusco. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Tusco's journey to becoming a more sustainable company. Then I'm going to hand over to Dan to talk in a little bit more detail about some of those aspects. So firstly, just a little bit about us. We're a creative agency with our headquarters in Bristol. We specialise in content, web branding and digital marketing. Our ethos at Tusco is really telling stories that have a positive impact in the world. That's what we really value, and that's how we try and approach all of our projects and the people we like to work with. We've been lucky enough to win some awards along the way, which has been really exciting. Next slide, please, Craig. So here are some of our clients. Really happy to be working with some of the businesses inside of the Better Business community, like Burgess Salmon and Resonance. We work with a lot of social enterprises and third sector. We really like to work with forward-thinking, purpose-driven, socially conscious companies. Next slide, please, Craig. So we made one of the films that you saw earlier today. It was really great to talk to different businesses in Bristol to find out what people are doing to combat COVID-19. A lot of businesses will, appreciate that having a desire to be more sustainable and have a lesser impact on the environment has to be matched or balanced with what's achievable within business. So we're really approaching this from our business's perspective and what we can offer and what we've used to kind of close that gap. So that's where B Corp comes in. So some of you may have heard of B Corp. So this is what we'll be covering today very briefly. So firstly, what B Corp is and how that's challenged our organisation, how this has changed our processes in-house and what we've begun to measure. It's highlighted the impact we were having on the environment too. Then we'll talk about innovations within the video space and how we've changed the way we've worked to incorporate this new environmental element. And then our takeaways from today's talk. Next slide, please, Craig. So, what is B Corp? I'll read this first one out. So, certified B corporations are a new kind of business that balances purpose and profit. They are legally required to consider the impact of their decisions on their workers, customers, suppliers, community, and the environment. This is a community of leaders driving a global movement of people using business as a force for good. So, they focus on people, planet, and profit, which we call our triple bottom line. B Corps are given a certification, if they pass a certain set of standards. And that set of standards is outlined by the B Corp Impact Assessment Tool. So this is what we've used in our organisation to hold up a mirror against what we were doing to see where we could improve. Next slide, please, Craig. So you may be wondering, what is this Impact Assessment Tool? We were when we first heard of it. Next slide, please, Craig. So the Impact Assessment Tool, it has, give or take, 187 questions. It's very holistic. It covers things from governance, workers, community, the environment, and customers. A little bit, covering some of the bases we heard earlier. These are the things we have to consider if we want to be a B Corp. We're going to focus on the environment today, in theme with the talk so far. Ultimately, you get a score, and you have to get more than 80 when you fill in this assessment tool to be certified as a B corporation. So I'm going to level with you. At the moment, we haven't reached that point. We're at about 60 at the moment, so there's still some way for us to go, but we're in that journey, and we just wanted to share that with you. So hopefully, if you're an organisation out there, you might find it useful. If you work for an organisation, you might be able to put some pressure or bring this into conversations with your leaders to start becoming a B Corp and be more responsible in these different ways. So I'm going to hand over to Dan now to talk a little bit about measurement.
Great, thanks Jake. So measurement, measure what exactly? It can be really hard to know where to start with these things, but now we've gone through a fair amount of the B Corp process, we have a bit of an insight as to the best place to start. And our advice really is just to start measuring as soon as possible. So there's loads of great organisations out there that can help you measure your carbon. We did a carbon literacy course at the BBC, and they introduced us to a carbon calculator called Albert. So we started using the Albert calculator, and we calculated our office usage, our travel, materials, disposal, accommodation. Unfortunately, there was a big overlap between what we were measuring with Albert and what we were being asked to provide for the B Corp process. So for example, we needed to tell B Corp how much waste we were producing as an organisation. Now that would have been really hard to estimate if we did that retrospectively, so we were really thankful that we'd already started to measure that. Next slide, please. So our total carbon usage for 2019 was just over 8 tonnes. That's 8 of those giant blue globes that you can see there. So at this point, there's 2 things that need to happen. One is look at each area and see what we can reduce, set reasonable targets for that reduction. And secondly, anything that can't be reduced, we look to offset. So the question was, how can we use this data and insight from the B Corp assessment tool to help us innovate as a business? So in terms of content, in particular video and animation, when COVID-19 came along and met our desire to be a more sustainable business, we developed new ways of filming, new ways of creating products. This was filming remotely, creating video using stock footage and archive, and producing content that's user generated. So this is a video that we did for Mental Health UK and Lloyds. So they came to us, they wanted a video that used live action footage. Now we were in the middle of a pandemic, so we couldn't go and film anything. So we used our libraries of stock footage, and we added some really cool layers of animation on top, and came up with this video. So, this is a new way of working, and this is the kind of thing that we really need in response to things like COVID-19 and our desire to be fairer, greener, stronger. Mental Health UK and Lloyds, they had concerns with this new way of working, actually get the results, but as you can see, 910% increase in views. This was a really effective piece of comms, and it was achieved whilst reducing carbon emissions. Next slide, please. So just quickly, here's a comparison of that project we did with MHUK and Lloyds with one of our more standard productions, same amount of days filming, same budget, same deliverables. So the main difference is with the COVID-19 production, we didn't have to have loads of people coming to the film set. So we saved on travel, we didn't have to light it up, so we saved on electricity. Even filming our whole film crew saved on plastic. So, you know, what we're really trying to show here is that viewing your services through an environmental lens doesn't have to mean sacrificing profit. We created this new offering and it helped us meet our remit as a creative agency whilst also being better for the environment. And all it took was some time, some innovation, and most importantly, the desire to do so. So back over to you, Jake, for some takeaways.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so Tusco's takeaways. Next slide, please, Craig. Sounds like a delivery service, but it's not, not yet. So the B Corp assessment tool can be a really useful way to hold up a mirror to your organisation and start asking the questions that we're going to need to ask ourselves in response to the environmental impacts we're having on the world. So we started asking those questions of ourselves and just bringing more awareness into our organisation. The second one, measurement is key, as Dan quite rightly says. You know, without measurement, you don't know the benchmarks, you don't know what targets to set and how long it's going to take to get there. Next one, innovation is necessary. You know, we're always asking ourselves as a company, how can we do things better? But looking at it through this environmental lens now, bringing that into the main part of our conception of an idea, really can, you know, have impacts on the environment and save carbon. Belief, a fairer, greener, stronger way is possible. You know, and the data backs it up. The slides Dan just went through there. We can achieve good results whilst also considering the impact we're having on the environment. And finally, teamwork. You know, we're really happy to be in this network and work with other companies to find out best practices. We learn a lot from listening to these kind of talks, and the wonderful panel we had on earlier, you know, teaches us a lot to kind of feed back into the way we work. So we hope we can contribute this back as well to the wider group. Next slide, please, Craig. So yeah, we just want to use this opportunity to talk about this pack we put together during lockdown. It's a free guide which you can download. It's full of tips and tools. It's called the top 5 freebies for charities and non-profits, but there's lots in there for other types of organisations. You can download that on our channels, easy to find, Facebook, LinkedIn, our website, and Bristol24, I believe, is sharing it in the chat as well. Just got the thumbs up, so it's there. And last slide, please. So yeah, we'd just like to say thank you to Bristol24 for putting this all this energy into this kind of initiative and bringing people together. We're really happy to be involved. So, and thanks wherever you are at home listening in. We're welcome. I don't think we've got time for questions today, but you can always get in contact with us if you want to learn anything more about B Corp. I believe we're handing back over to B247 now, so thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys.
Seamless transition back there. We just wanted to come back to say thank you to everybody who is watching today, who contributed, who put time and energy into this event and also into our Better Business membership, but also how we can build back better.
Yeah, just like to say thank you from me. Thanks to everyone who's joined. Thanks for taking the time. And we will be running some more events like this as we go into 2021. It's been a big, huge learning curve for us how to transition some of our events to digital. But again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.